All right, we are live. You are about to enjoy a Firearms Radio Network podcast. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows. If you like what we're doing and would like to help support the show, visit patreon.com/afteractionproject. If you'd like to throw us some free support and appreciation, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes. And then tonight's episode, just like every episode, is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network. Be sure to check out the other great podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network by visiting firearms-related.net. Our other show sponsor is the RangeBuddy.App. If you guys haven't checked that out, be sure to get over to your favorite app store, download the RangeBuddy.App. It's a collection of 130 plus shooting drills. There's a virtual instructor component on there that I think you'll really enjoy using. That's enough about that. Let's get into tonight's episode. We are joined by Adam Winch of Defenders USA, and we will be discussing his Fighting Handgun Course. Your hosts tonight, as always, are Andy and myself, Jeremy. Neither one of us are pretty good at shooting. We're even worse at podcasting, so we appreciate you guys sticking around for as long as you have. Let's get into it. Adam, talk to us a little bit about what got you into the firearms training world.
So police officer for a long time, right? Over a decade. And I just saw over and over and over that if we could get Joe Jane civilian trained up to somewhat the level of what I and my partners had, then we wouldn't have to show up their worst day, right? They could do it themselves. They could take care of themselves. And at some point, it became kind of a challenge from actually a chief of police to go, hey, do something about it. If you're going to gripe about it, do something about it. So I ended up creating a handgun course. It was a cry for help from actually a church. Something bad happened in the church, and they wanted some training. And I happened to be a SWAT guy in the church. They asked me to do the training, and it kind of grew a name, and it just grew from there. But it was really just going, hey, I want more people to be trained. That kind of started the nexus of training. And then once that grew a name, I started getting more and more people asking, and I was able to kind of fulfill my desire of get more people trained so we don't have to go take care of it for them, right? You take care of your bad stuff instead of making some poor cop show up and do it for you.
I love it. That's awesome, man. I think we need more of that mentality going on around here, and then definitely more of the mentality from the individual civilian, the mom and dads out there. It's not a knock on police or paramedics or anybody. They just will not be there in time. And if you're able to defend yourself.
I saw that over and over. I mean, there was only 3 or 4 times I could probably count on one hand the time I was there in the commission of crime. And I'm not talking like the quick purse snatch you saw, or when I was working surveillance and I saw some doper thing go, or, when something is coming. But I'm talking when you're just there and organically a bad crime happens. That never happens, right? Dirtbags know that if cops are around, they got a badge and a gun, then, well, they're probably foolish to do something then. And though bad guys tend to be dumb, they tend not to be that dumb. So it never happened. And shucks, I'm married to a cop. That hot little chick, right? She's a tough cop. But even she will tell you, we're never there at the moment. You've got to take care of yourself. Then we show up 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 hours, 5 hours later and take the report. And really, for your safety and benefit, that's not the best for you. The best is you be your own defender.
Absolutely. Laura, talk to us a little bit about yourself, your background in the firearms training world, and what brought you to Adam's Fighting Handgun Course.
Oh, that's a lot in one question. Well, I am Joe Jane civilian. I have no military or LEO background, and I was very naive several years ago and had a wake up moment, had a wake up call in my life. There was an incident that happened, and it was a close call. It was something that could have gone very badly, very quickly. And by the grace of God, I got through that. And that lit a fire in me, though, to get training urgently. Like all of a sudden I realized, the world is not the way that I thought it was. And burying your head in the sand and just hoping that nothing bad will ever happen to you is not a good strategy in life. And so I went out and sought training, and I didn't realize that once I started training, I wouldn't want to stop training. I got a little bit addicted to training, I guess you could say, and I took every class I could possibly take. And eventually, not by Adam, this was long before I ever met Adam, was asked to become an instructor. Like, had I ever considered it? No, it wasn't even a goal of mine. And but I did like to help people. I did like to share information with people, and I was interested in having the right information. And I thought if I could help other women, especially who are, maybe afraid to come to training or intimidated or whatever, maybe I could kind of be that gateway for them to come and feel comfortable enough to do that. So I became an instructor, and then was it last year or the year before, Adam? I can't remember. They're starting to run together now. Adam Winch ended up basically in my backyard again, by the grace of God, and didn't know who he was or what he was about or anything, but looked him up and saw that he had a training class coming up in my hometown. And so I thought, what the heck, why not? So I'm an instructor. I've been to lots of training, lots of classes. What could this guy possibly show me that I haven't seen before? Well, I was humbled very quickly. And I wasn't actually that cocky, but you kind of think you know a thing or two after you've been training for quite a while, and especially when you become an instructor. And I was incredibly humbled. And it was one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. And I learned so much in those 3 days of that class that I took with Adam. Like, it literally changed my life. It changed not only the way I shoot, but the way I think, the way I handle myself, and eventually, I mean, I've been transformed. It's been a process. It wasn't like overnight, but it was definitely a catalyst that's changed me for the better, for my family, for those people around me, and made me a much better instructor. I mean, I am so much better now than I ever was before, and that's all because I took one of his classes. So never saw that coming. That was crazy. Still is. And then I think it was summer of last year he invited me on to become one of his instructors. So yeah.
What was the most humbling part of that class, or the thing that you struggled the most with?
The most humbling part of the class was that I realized that I took most of the instruction that I had previously. I had assumed it was all correct. I had just taken it with a grain of salt. I didn't question it. And that was the first time where I realized, because I hadn't questioned it, I hadn't realized that it actually didn't work well for me, and that there was a better way that Adam showed me. And then my eyes were open to the fact that, like, just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean that that's what's going to work for you. Everyone finds their own path, their own way. And of course, there are some basic things, right, that, are generally correct. But once you get past that, there's a lot of things you need to explore for yourself. And some of even just the basic concepts weren't even right, to be honest. And it was just mind blowing to me. At first I was like mad about it, I guess you'd say. 'Cause I was like, oh, I thought I knew this stuff, And it wasn't just like I was mad because I was wrong. I was mad because I had spent money for years learning, putting in reps on things that actually I needed to undo. And that was really frustrating for me. And then by the end of the class, I'm like, oh my gosh, everything I've been teaching my students, I don't feel like I can teach them that thing anymore, that doctrine of what I learned. Like, so that was a conflict for sure. Luckily, then eventually he invited me on to be one of his instructors, so that became irrelevant. But at the time, like, I had a curriculum that I was supposed to teach a certain way, right? And I wasn't to divert from that. And so that was a huge conflict for me. But it all worked out in the end.
I have to agree with that. As a, we've mentioned it in other podcasts where I used to assist my training counselor. And then when I started going to more and more classes, because, you take that certain course and you become a certain instructor and you think this is the end all be all. This is the way you teach. This is how you teach it. It's got to go this way. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in another course and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't this isn't what I was taught to teach. Like what's happening here?
Mhm.
And then you go to another class and you're like, wait a minute, this is getting me even further off of that thing that I'm supposed to teach regularly.
I know.
You
I
know,
know.
so I can totally relate to you there. But you mentioned something, and I just wanted to repeat this saying that our pastor said it the other day, and you can take it in many different ways, politics, firearms, but I posted it on my page, and it says, when you make any judgment without gathering more information, your bias influences the outcome, right?
Mm,
And that's exactly the thing of like, we learn one thing, we think it's that the way, right?
mhm.
And if we don't go any further, we become this one road person.
Yeah.
And what are we teaching, right? As instructors, right? We're teaching
Right.
this is the way you do it. These students take off out in the
Mhm.
world. You're going to get that one that goes and starts taking classes like myself, like you, like
Mhm.
Jeremy. And that
Mhm.
person's like, man, that first Andy dude was like way off.
Mhm.
Like, I don't even know what the
And
hell
it's
he was
not
saying.
without good intention, you know? There's plenty of good
Absolutely.
intention behind it. That's the thing. So, I mean,
Mhm.
thank God my eyes were opened, you know, and I feel very blessed that I was able to get my butt kicked by him for 3 days because it was the best thing that I ever went through. It was
Yeah.
tough though. I mean, it was tough on
The,
many levels, but
the coolest thing was the almost fury in her eyes, right? Just the sheer anger, right? The tautness and the anger within her own body as you watched her do things, because it completely violated everything she'd been taught in this large national, training program that's so famous out there, and it just flew in the face of everything, and it just
Mhm.
the fury of this woman. And I'm just like, hey, look, just try.
I came around though. I stayed
It just came around.
open-minded, I think.
It was constant, just like, well, what about this? Well, what about this? And I mean, she was that demanding. I want to know, which is what you want, right? You want that person. And she just, why? I don't get it.
I
And
wasn't
how
that
come?
mad.
And it was hilarious. And just watching the fury and then the recognition of, oh, this is something new. This is something different. I've never thought of that. Wait a minute. That makes complete medical sense, body structure sense, visual sense, you name it. And just watching that transformation happen, where by day 2.5 or 3 or whatever it was, you could just see this was a completely different cookie, right? This is the dough had been malleable and it was a completely different person. And just from that point forward, the growth was it was incredible to watch.
Yeah,
That's
because
cool.
my shooting improved literally overnight.
Yeah.
I mean, the proof's in the pudding. If you want to test out a theory, put in the reps, see if it works, and it works. So there's my test right there. So it wasn't just that I was being forced to look at something differently. I was actually testing that out in real time, and it was working. So
Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit in the pre-show. How, and I think the big problem that we have now, over the last decade, I'd say over the last 6 or 7 years, even less shorter the time than a decade, right? Last 6 or 7 years, I think the growth that we have seen in the firearms training industry,
Yes.
as far as like the quality of
Yes.
instructors, Akil and Tiffany, they call it the gateway instructors. The quality of those instructors has just gone up exponentially. I think we still have a big obstacle, and that's one of the two avenues to get in insurance and I guess approved by the states is you have to become an instructor for a company that's curriculum is outdated and stuck in their ways. And then the other one that it does is a great multi-level marketing platform that the quality of instruction I think is a little bit better than the other guys, but it still feels like it's an MLM type of deal. And then I think we're still seeing some folks kind of get funneled into, the people that you train with when you go to TacCon or some of these other, traveling trainers, or when you have Adam show up in your backyard and you can sign up and you can get training with a reputable instructor who knows how to flip the switch for a lot of folks. So that's exciting to see. I think we have, there's less of the obstacle, but it's still out there, man. There's still a bunch of certificate mills running around. And they do a great job getting people to think, hey, I can be an instructor, spend a weekend taking a 2-day class, know what I'm doing, and I can go out there and teach a whole bunch of people a whole bunch of things. But I digress. So let's get back into the course. Adam, talk to us a little bit about the course requirements. What gear do I have to have if I'm showing up to class? The minimum round count, all that good stuff. Basically, take us through that student email that you would send a student that just signed up for your Fighting Handgun course.
Okay, so it's called Fighting Handgun Concepts. And I run it in a couple different segments, right? Sometimes I'll run a 1 day, a 2 day. In fact, I'm doing one, I think, in 2 weekends from now with Jeremy Horn in Salt Lake, right? That's a 2 day one. Later, I'm doing a 3 day one. So it kind of depends on what we're doing. If you're showing up at this, depending on how far we go, for 2 days, I generally tell people bring about 1,000 rounds, right? If you show up with 1,100 rounds, 1,200 rounds, you very well might go through it. If you show up with, skimp on it and bring 750 or so, we'll work our best way through it and try not to use up too much of your ammo in that time frame. But I mean, I've had people, I ran a SWAT team through this for 5 days straight. And I think they all showed up with 2,000 rounds and they ended all 2,000 rounds, right? Because they worked pretty hard with it. So it kind of depends on how far we're going to go with it. So really what it is it's based on something that I went through as a cop, right? One time when I had to use a gun defensively in a pretty rough situation, I found that my use of that gun did not fit my training, right? And understand, I'd been a soldier for a long time, been a cop for a long time, SWAT guy, you name it. And everything we'd done had been a little bit of movement or had been flat range stuff. We're all in a square range. You get your perfect little squared up stance. You draw your gun, you shoot your gun, and you're a ninja because America, right? And then when you find you get yourself into a fight, the fight that I was in, and then the couple other gunfights that my buddies or partners had been in, did not rarely fit what we were trained on. So after that, I realized, okay, my flat range, square range training did not fit the context of reality for what I'd gone through. So therefore, I started searching for trainers on the outside. And, I went to a bunch of different trainers, but I really realized that, okay, based on my experience and everything else, here's what we have gone through at different times. And this is more realistic to what I think is out there. And a lot of trainers won't do it because it is either a little bit, it's a bit more involved. People are always worried about liability, and I understand that. And you're always obviously worried about your student safety, but yet fighting with a gun is much more movement based, much more dynamic based, much more unconventional positional based than it is just standing still, fat, dumb, and happy on a range, right? So I started just kind of building based on what happened to me. And from there, that evolved from working from on the ground to in all sorts of different compromised positions to in movement and running. And that's kind of how it built. Yet for the course, right, most people come into this, most people show up at a course like this and they all think that they're ready with a gun. They're ninjas, right? And usually I got to almost take them back to fundamentals and fix all their fundamentals before we can do much else. But once we've got people solid and good, now we're incorporating a little bit of movement and really fast movement too once we get there. And then we start incorporating, being in all sorts of different positions on the ground, upside down, flipped around, you name it, on your knees, on your butt, laying down on your stomach, on your back, on your sides, wherever else, and having to respond to these things very, very quickly. Flowing up and down, moving back and forth, side to side, moving around people the way you do in real life, or moving around cars and pillars and so many things that do happen. So it just builds from there, and it takes a lot of time because most people show up thinking they're ready for that, and they're usually not, even if they're already very highly trained. So I usually have to spend my first day or so of this really fixing not just their fundamentals, but their cognizance of what their trigger finger is doing, what their muzzle is doing, what they're doing when they're doing so many other things, and they have to be thoughtful of that. Once we've got that down, we've got that safely down, we now just incorporate more and more and more movements and speed and people and decisional shooting, like what your app has, the RangeBuddy.App. There's so much to this that it takes a lot of work. So that's kind of the long way, I guess, to answer the question. It just depends on how much time I have them. And if I have them and they're already trained up, we'll jump straight into it. But if they're not really well trained, and most people unfortunately think they're really well trained, then we've got to usually slow it down. I just taught in Texas. I took this whole course down to Texas. It's the largest indoor gun range in Texas down there. And we were supposed to be running 2 days of this. I got there and about half the class was already some type of instructor. They've been shooting for a long time. There was actually only one person there who had only shot a gun, I don't know, for a couple of months. And I quickly found out, even though everybody there was some type of instructor, for the exception of that one person, I mean, we had a federal agent there, that I literally had to take this back to kindergarten just to fix so much on the safety, on just the basic fundamentals, that we almost didn't get into a fighting handgun course, because it took 2 full days to get through the basics of this to then begin moving for the last hour or 2 or 3 of those classes into fighting handgun course. So to me, it's a real good thing. It's a real joy when I show up and people are already, they have everything solid. They're well trained. They're good with their safety. They can also think on their feet. They can shoot under some movement. And now I can just add to it and just build from there.
Is there a minimum skill set or like a standards test that students need to have before taking the class?
Yeah,
All of them.
all of them. Yeah, if you pass some of the basic standards that are out there, that at least I know you can do it. Whether it's, I've never set an actual standard. What I do for people is I'll have people show up in a class, and then I have a quick small test I have them shoot. It's a 10-round test, but I'll have them shoot a version of a drill that I've kind of come up with. And what I do is I use that time to find out, can they move with a gun? Are they safe with a gun? Can they handle the gun? Can they not point at themselves or somebody else? Can they think while they do things? And if they have that, then we can move on. If they don't, then hey, it might be time to think about, you either sit out and watch, or you know what, sir, ma'am, I'm happy to refund your money, but at this point, I can't have you here, because this is going to get very quick, very deep. And for your sake, and really for those that are here, if you're not able to do this, then I'm sorry. And other people are more important than somebody's ego, so we have to do that.
Laura, from a student's perspective, what does that first day look like?
Of the fighting handgun?
Yeah. Like after the range safety brief, what are some of the drills that you're getting into? Just really kind of take us through that, some of the thoughts that you had during the initial hours of that class.
Well, I wrote down a couple of notes while he was talking. I was going to interrupt him, and then I decided that wasn't a nice thing to do. But
go with those first, and then we'll re-ask that question.
Well, the first couple of things that I had written down was my favorite concept of the class really is that you don't really know that's what he's doing, but he's teaching you how to think under pressure. And you're doing that through movement and drills and through listening to him and what he's saying. I remember one certain portion of the class, which was the most difficult, was where he would add the physical load, so your heart rate would be up, but then you would not be facing the target. And then when he called out whatever you were supposed to shoot, it would be a problem you had to solve. So it was like 2 + 1, or it was like, I can't remember what, maybe you had to like even mix colors. I think maybe at one point it was like blue plus yellow or something. And so it made you really think while you were moving, and then you had to go, well, which target do I shoot? Then you had to evaluate the target. What's the size of the target? How quickly do I, can I get the shot? So the cognitive stacking, he does a really good job of layering that cognitive stacking in a way that when you first come out of the gate, you don't feel completely overwhelmed. You do feel like something's going on and you better pay attention. But then by the end of it, oh, can you hear me? Okay. What I was saying was that he stacks it and layers it in such a way that he cognitively stacks you slowly, so that you don't just come out of the gate doing some crazy ninja stuff. You actually are built up to that. And it's sort of honestly a trust exercise to some degree. You have to be able to trust the people next to you, that they are safe and that they're not going to do anything. You have to learn to trust yourself, that you can make the shots and do what is being asked of you, but you also have to trust him, the instructor, and know that he's leading you down a path that isn't, going to be too much or too challenging for you, that he's kind of got your back in that regard, even though he's going to push you pretty hard. And I really liked that because when you're in that kind of a dynamic situation, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things could go wrong very quickly. But he's one of those types of instructors that knows where he can push you and where he shouldn't. And you sort of have to trust in that because you are in a learning process and you have to be willing to stretch yourself in order to grow. And he does that in a variety of ways, whether it's through heart rate, cognitive stacking, movement, lots of different things. But I guess what my point is that I like that it's not all just in your face all at once. It's a gradual building throughout the course.
I think that's one of the biggest benefits of a good instructor is that they do that cognitive stacking, right? It's to where you start off at a level that the instructor is comfortable with, and then he has the ability to add and build to that, to where by the end of it's a 2-day course, right, Adam?
1 to 3 days, depending on what we're doing.
Okay. So 1 to 3 days, depending, 1 day to 3 days, right? You're going to build and build and build to where by the end of the first or third day, people have built on enough to where it's something that they can take home and continue to build on it. So I really like that thought process.
Yeah. And Andy, kind of what you're talking about, right? When your day comes, when the balloon flies for you and you've got to go out with a gun, it's oftentimes going to be in somewhat of an environment where there's other people. It'll probably be in somewhat closer quarters, and you don't have somebody there to be your range safety officer, right? You have to be your own range safety officer in the middle of your fight, not only between you and the bad guy, but also what's around you and also beyond what you're shooting at, whether you decide to miss or whether you hit and say the bullet or bullets penetrate through. And so you have to be that. So for this type of course, it's really a growth of trust for me. I'm glad, so glad, Laura, you touched on this. I have to learn to trust these people. And oftentimes they haven't realized how much they have to trust themselves, how much they have to trust me, how much, and you have to really grow that confidence in them and then slowly grow them to be confident that they can put their bullets where they need to be. So that if there's a live human being, it's not going to pass through them. And they're also not just going to spray and pray their bullets out. They're going to put them where they need to be, because litigiously in the United States of America, if you miss, you could really face some pretty severe consequences, even if it doesn't hit other humans. And so you have to put it where it's intended to go, but you also got to do it at speeds, usually under pain, shock, and surprise, and under confusion, and in a topsy-turvy event. So therefore, you have to be your own thinking range safety officer in that process. And so therefore, in this training, you have to build their confidence that they can do that. But to do that, I have to build my confidence in them first. Then you have to get them realizing, okay, I can do this around other people. Then you have to build their confidence they can do this by themselves without paying attention to other people, because they've learned the other people around them are competent on their own too. And now, therefore, you're starting to begin to simulate what is realistically the fight you might be in someday. And that's just how it is. So that takes a lot of training, trust, and confidence to get there. But isn't that what people need? Because if their day ever comes, they're not going to stand there with nothing between them and their bad guy, or maybe nothing beyond their bad guy, or at least it's rare, to where it's just a perfect, easy bill drill. It's a perfect, easy first draw to shot sub 1 second. It's going to be a thoughtful process where movement is involved. Usually you're off kilter somehow. And you have to be thoughtful even in the moment when you're confused or even under pain.
I like that. So I want to talk more about that, but I want to step back a little bit, because we talked about the round count, somewhere 750 on upwards to, 1,200 rounds. But is this course gear wise? Is this kind of duty rig, open carry, concealed carry? Is it what you bring, or how does that work?
I think context matters here, right? When I train cops next weekend, I think, or the weekend after I'm training, I think I got 6 or 7 cops in a course. Bring what you're going to carry, right? In this case, they're probably all going to bring duty rigs. I ran this course for a bunch of Arizona cops recently, and some were detectives, so they wore their detective gear. Others were either SWAT guys or they were patrol people. They brought what they had there. But let's say you're Joe Jane civilian, which is the vast majority of people come to courses anyways. bring what you would normally carry, right? In the manner with which you would carry it. So if you're an appendix carrier with your polo shirt or what your button down, your board shorts, whatever you've got, right? You're the lady in yoga pants, maybe you've thrown on an Enigma, whatever it is you would carry on a normal basis. That's what I want you to run. And really, if you think about this from a competition rig or even a duty rig, because you're doing so many different things, you're in so many different positions, oftentimes on the ground, with your body on top of your gear, you can tear up competition rig stuff. You can almost, you won't really, but you almost might tear up your duty rig. You're certainly not going to walk away with your duty rig and your competition gear not scarred up a bit. So if you're trying to keep your stuff nice and pretty and pristine, don't bring it to this course. Right. And I try to get most people to work from concealment, especially if I get my cops or I say I get my spec ops guys or somebody like that. I want them working from concealment because they so rarely do. They're always in duty rigs. Yet, really, when you think about it, you're only living half your life or a third of your life on duty. The other portions of your lives are off duty. And really, if you're walking around open carrying, I tell you, generally, with some respect, you're generally stupid and foolish. So therefore, let's go ahead and conceal it and let's work from concealment because that tends to be the vast majority of our lives anyways.
I like that. That's a good thought of being able to run. I never thought of it that way. I guess for like law enforcement specifically, you have a bunch of cops that are going to show up in their duty rigs because that's what they usually run. But as you mentioned, I got to go home, got to go to Walmart. Got to get groceries, right? Yep. You're not going to carry your duty rig then. So I think that makes a lot of sense. There's oftentimes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said there's oftentimes that I'll take a course to where if I have the ability, day one I'll run open and then day two I'll run concealed just to have that ability. Again, kind of we're talking Laura and all of us here instructors to have that ability and knowledge to be able to work with both of them, I think has a benefit too. So.
Yeah, you need to have both those pathways built, right? To where you can do either or if you're going to do it. But the problem is the vast majority of cops, they always show up, or let's say my soldiers, let's say our spec ops guys or whatever, they show up in their duty gear that's there. And it's because really rarely do we ever train the cop, the spec ops guy, the soldier, the whomever, the guy or girl. We rarely train them with off-duty gear or concealed gear. So therefore, they're not confident in it, right? I mean, think about this. 11 years as a cop, and I took 1 2-hour course, a training course on concealed carry. One time as a cop. Yet I carried concealed off duty from day one as a cop, carried everywhere I went. I know most cops don't do that, unfortunately. But for those who do, because we don't train it, they're not confident in it. Yet if we would train it, they'd be more confident. We'd have more off-duty cops carrying guns, which I think is really a help to the public, certainly to themselves, because they're walking around with a target on their back, right? They've arrested Joe Jane Dirtbag in their town 100 times. They know who they are. They know who their families are. Believe me, as a cop, you need to carry a gun, even in a large metro area, yet you need the comfortability of doing that. So if I can get most people in most of my courses to work from concealment, even if you're coming from a duty perspective, shooting is shooting. Learning to manipulate in these odd, uncomfortable positions is simply the same thing. You're just changing whatever holster or gear you're using. Just come learn the concepts and then adapt it whatever gear you're actually using.
Yeah, I've mentioned before, I grew up kind of on the wrong side of law enforcement. I was in trouble and kind of hung around the wrong kind of people. But now today, you did not. Well, are you actually from Arizona though, right?
Yeah.
You could have possibly at one point. I'm just saying. I lived in Phoenix for 15 years, so
okay,
it's possible. Anyway, now I'm kind of like a law enforcement junkie. I watch On Patrol Live regularly. I think I've seen every Cops episode there is, and you hit the nail on the head just from a civilian perspective of watching these police officers like, hey, so-and-so, bro, you're here again, and it doesn't like, as soon as you take the uniform off, you go to that same gas station to get a candy bar and a Coke. It's not like the dude's not going to recognize you, and then at this point, now you're with your wife, you're with your children, vice versa, whoever it may be. But, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I had that happen to me within 6 weeks of being a cop. Ran into the first person I arrested, and it was a very dangerous situation. I'm so glad I had a gun.
Mm-hmm. So Laura, do you often conceal carry, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
Has that benefit you with this course as far as being with family or being in other kind of businesses. Just kind of expand a little bit more on concealed carry, bring it in with what you've learned from Adam and how that benefits you.
Well, I think training the way that you carry is absolutely a smart idea, and that's what I've done. When I first started training, I mean, years of training, I did open carry. I always was like, it never really occurred to me for some reason. Like, okay, why are we carrying concealed, but we're training open? Like, I don't understand why everybody's doing that. It doesn't make any sense. And then of course I met, like, everything got turned on its head when I met Adam, but then it was like everything made sense then because we were training the way that we were going to carry. And then I started implementing that, all the things that I'd learned from him into my dry fire practice, into everything I was doing. And then everything just congruently lines up because you're not switching anything up. You're not switching from training to every day. It's the same thing, which makes sense. Why wouldn't you do that? But I didn't do that for the longest time, and I can't even tell you why. Again, I just didn't ask enough questions. I didn't question things enough. I regret that, but I'm glad now that I'm able to feel, I feel a lot more confident than I did before. I feel a lot more comfortable with what I'm able to do because now I know what I can do. I know what my concealed carry draw stroke, what my draw to first shot is consistently. And I know I'm confident in what I'm able to do. And so I can make better decisions now because of that. And that's important to know.
I think it's if you take a class and you're open carrying, you're carrying from strong side hip, you're going to be faster. You don't have to clear that concealment garment, right?
Mm-hmm.
I took, we were talking about a buddy, Tim Heron. Tim and I traveled out to Casa Grande, Arizona a couple of years ago, and we took a course by Tom Gibbons. And, I think Tim and I were the only students running from concealment. Tim ran, if I remember correctly, he ran 1 or 2 of the days from concealment. I was running my Glock 48. I had the Shield RMSC dot on it, I think, at the time. Yeah. And so that shit to bet on me in that class.
Of course.
Right. So, I've taken Tim's practical performance, or his performance pistol course, and I ran that from concealment. The first time I took it, I was running Neo Mags for my backup, which was a dumb thing to do just because it's, I think I lost a little bit of what I could have gained out of that class just because I was fumbling with a magazine in my pocket. So I think a lot of it is, a lot of students, they want to be as fast as they can. So they set themselves up for success. And I'm like, well, you're really just kind of hindering yourself out there in the real world.
Right.
I started carrying a fanny pack for the last few months now, just so as an instructor, I can, I have that firsthand experience with off-body carry. What does it look like? What are some of the drawbacks? How do you overcome some of those things? So my goal this year, either this year or the first half of next year, is to take a class from a fanny pack to see how that works. And hopefully I could take it with Andy so he can tease me and make fun of me.
I still don't to this day understand how he can brag about a fanny pack, but hey, you do you. But
hey, the 1980s mold, you might as well wear it.
Right. Hey, Jeremy, real quick. So I wanted to touch on what you just mentioned, right? You talked about running with a Neo Mag. What do you carry now today, with the exception of your firearm and your fanny pack? Do you carry an extra magazine?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
No. I haven't carried a spare mag for a while.
See, I don't either. And so it's like when you go to a class, right, and you run the Neo Mag, because at the time, my assumption, because I had a Neo Mag too for a while, until I realized in the first iteration of it, it sucked because Glock Mag's plastic, it was not strong enough, right? And then I ended up always fumbling a magazine in my pocket because it'd fall off the Neo Mag every time you'd bend down or bend over or whatever, right? So if you think about that, though, like if we run what we brung, however you say it, if you brought mag pouches, and Adam, I want you to Adam and Laura, you guys can kind of pipe in here. We bring mag pouches, right? So we run from concealment, and then we put mag pouches on our hips so we can run and reload really quick. But we never run mag pouches when we conceal carry. Well, me personally, I don't. You don't. So how do we build that in to a course as far as like I don't really carry an extra mag, but we have to do reloads in the class, right? Does that make sense, Adam?
Yeah. Can I give you a different perspective?
Sure.
I realize the likelihood of having to reload and use a gun in a defensive encounter as a civilian in America is almost nil, from what I understand. Right, going through Tom Givens courses and some others. Right, I think it's only happened 5 different times in recorded history that we know of for sure, and 2 or 3 of those are anomalies. And I get it. Right, so it's harder than getting struck by lightning, let alone 3 or 4 times. So it's a rarity. Here, I do carry a spare mag. I carry a spare mag everywhere. Let me give you a reason why. It's a whoopee. When I had to use my gun, when I suddenly realized, when there was a pause in the fight, that I had holes in my gun, that my gun had empty holes, there was nothing more comforting than that moment to reload that gun and get it fully topped off and ready for war. It was extremely comforting in that moment. And the way I see it is, yeah, your likelihood of needing a spare magazine is so low, it's ridiculous. It's just more crap to add to it, right? It doesn't, it doesn't work in your sports bra and yoga pants or whatever else you're wearing. It just doesn't, right? At the same time, right, I've personally been called to me as a defender, right? You see the sign up there. I've been called to be a defender. Not just of myself, but maybe of others. So let's say somebody decides to durka a mall somewhere and shoot the thing up, or a church or whatever else, and I just happen to be in the arena. Oftentimes those things take more than 2 or 3 or 4 rounds. Not always, but sometimes. I've been party to events or been around events where it's taken 70, 80, 120 rounds to get the Lord's work done. And to me, I just know that if that day ever comes, even if it's only one, as a Joe Jane civilian, even if it's only 1 round, or it's 5 rounds, or it's 7. And though my gun carries 17 plus 1, I want that comfort in knowing this thing is ready to go back to war. Just because, what if there's dirtbag number 2? What if it wasn't enough? What if the mag I do have goes down? And to me, I want that comfort. And, if I was just carrying this for the defense of myself and maybe the close ones I love, then possibly that's what I would do. But I know for me, I'm called, if that day ever comes, to truly respond to things. And that may need copious rounds. And I want that comfort, even if it doesn't take copious rounds, of knowing my gun's ready to go back fully into the fight if I have to do that. So it's a different perspective. I don't think it applies to the vast majority of people who carry guns. But I know for me, based on what I've come to from my own personal aspect, that's where I'm at on it.
It's like the new movie, right? Oppenheimer. I have not seen it yet. I heard it's good. But that one trailer, right? He's like, hey, what's the percentage that we're going to blow the whole world up? And he's like, I don't know, less than 0. He's like, but not 0? No, it's not 0. So, I get that other part of it. And it's a thing. It's like, I'm also now carrying pepper spray in my pocket. And
Good.
So it's like,
Good.
what's the balance? Like, okay, so gun, pepper spray, magazine, flashlight, keys, wallet, cell phone, and it just starts adding and adding and adding. And it's like, what's the point of, like, what's the give to where you're not carrying a law enforcement duty belt or a pocket full of stuff, right? And that's where I've always have this thought process of, yeah, I get it, it's not 0, but would I likely need a second magazine, or would I likely need pepper spray more?
Yeah, your likelihood of needing pepper spray and maybe a tourniquet or IFAC is far higher than a gun. But just what if? And
right.
So it's that. And for me, I carry appendix. So because I also have my magazine appendix, what I find for me is I'm beginning to develop my 100-year-old gut now, is it actually gives me a little balance on both sides. It helps stabilize a little bit by having, I don't do the sidecar thing. I don't like that, but I have it kind of set to both sides of the hips. And it gives me a little bit of balance. So it's a little bit more comfortable. But for me, it's just that one time having to reload under stress and just knowing that comfort. After that, that kind of did it for me, because I was the guy who never carried another magazine. But after that, it kind of crystallized for me the why for me personally, though I don't think that works for most people.
Yeah. So I'm not, so I have an Enigma now too that I've been working with and making it try to adjust. And I'm on one of the Enigma Facebook pages, and I'm watching the involvement of this Enigma. And I think it's a really good thing. I want to say that in the beginning, but I'm also seeing people turning that Enigma into a utility belt.
It's a battle belt.
It's turned into kind of a concealed battle belt, and I'm like, man, I don't know
It's
if
too
I'm
much.
ready or willing to go that far, right? So, Laura, I want to bring you into this conversation, and just kind of ask you, what do you carry and what makes you comfortable as far as your loadout for an everyday? Just
Well,
to add to.
I am a huge Enigma fan. I wear an Enigma every day in everything that I do. There, I've done many crazy things in an Enigma. I don't know. That sounds bad. No, I mean, like, I've ridden horses in an Enigma. I've run many miles in an Enigma, worked out the whole nine with an Enigma, and it's my go-to thing. It's like once it's on, I don't even know it's there anymore. I've got it dialed in how I like it. I don't carry a spare mag. I've got, like Adam, I've got 17+1, and but I do take pepper spray with me everywhere I go, and it's funny because sometimes when I go to leave the house, you know, I've had times where I've gotten in the car and I forgot the pepper spray, and I'm like, I probably won't need it. I probably don't need pepper. I got my gun, and then I'm like, gosh, there's a way higher probability I would need the pepper spray. So I go back in the house and get the pepper spray, you know. But yeah, pepper spray and a gun for sure. And the flashlight I don't carry with me all the time every day, but especially if I know it's later in the day or if I anticipate I'll be, you know, I'm one of those this is weird to say, but I'm one of those people, like, I don't generally, if I don't have to, I don't go anywhere in the dark. I just I'm a daytime person. I'm home at night. I don't night prowl. I don't go to the grocery store at night. I just don't. I'm not scared of it. I just prefer daytime, obviously. Yeah, the flashlight usually doesn't come into play unless I know for sure that I am going to be, you know, I might need it later. But I know that that's probably not the way to look at it, that I should have it with me all the time, every day. I'm just being honest. So that's what I carry.
So in hopes of increased viewership, since you're saying you're doing stuff strange with your Enigma, you're saying you do it during the day only? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, day only. Day only. Yep.
You know, well, Jeremy,
We'll
you can take a page out of Laura's book here. Instead of the Enigma, though, you know, do your things with your fanny pack and just imagine the stuff you can put in it. You know, just.
I'm sitting here. I traded the spare mag for my palm pepper spray, and then I'm sitting here. I'm like, there's room in the fanny pack right next to where the holster is for my gun for that backup mag. I don't know why I haven't. It hasn't crossed my mind, but I was of the mindset that, hey, carry a spare mag. Just on the internet, there's a lot of you're not gonna need a spare mag, you're not gonna need a reload in a gunfight, yada yada yada. And then, you know, there are channels out there that will say, they've reviewed millions of hours of video and not once has a mag swap been necessary. And it's like, it's less than one, but it's not zero, right? And it's the minute that you need it and you don't have, it's the same reason we carry the freaking gun. The minute you have it and you don't need it, or the minute you need it and you don't have it, is when it matters the most.
One day. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no reason for not carrying it. I got the room in the fanny pack. I think Shield Arms is they've made the S15 magazines. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but these dudes innovate that. They had a long slide for the Shield, and it's no longer in production. And I kick myself for missing out on that, because it essentially would have been a single stack 1911, before, a plastic single stack, right before the Glock 48 and all this other stuff. But they're releasing it's called the Junk Sack, and you can carry a 48 in the same orientation. It's a fanny pack, but the Junk Sack.
Wild things.
Yeah. But I was talking to Brandon, and you can carry a 48. So I'd be able to carry my Glock 48 in the same orientation that I carry at Appendix. The only difference is it's behind a rip open zipper. So
now you're going to carry two fanny packs.
Yeah. One for my first aid stuff, the spare mag, the backup gun, the backup mag, and then for my primary go-to stuff, right? So
perfect.
So Jeremy, I think we've been hearing a lot of the same people, right, that talk about you don't need a spare mag, and you don't in America. You just don't, right? I grew up in a different country. There, you needed spare stuff, but you don't. The problem is I'm finding everybody who preaches that has never had to reload a gun under stress. There's just a comfort that comes from it. I can't articulate it besides that. And I've not met too many people who've had to that go, yeah, I don't need it. It seems like a good majority of the people I know that had to use it go, yeah, I might throw it in there. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm just telling you that's what it came down to me, and it just, it was such a comfort.
I'm not a very smart man, but I'd imagine it also creates a psychological reset for you.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do when you can do it. And if you can do it, that probably means you have some time to get it done. So I can absolutely see that.
So back to this course, right? So
yes.
Part of this fighting handgun course is at the end of everything, you're reloading, right? Before that gun goes away, you top that thing off, right? Go to every gun course out there. Bang, 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 you put it in your holster. Bang, 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 you put it in a holster. Why would you put a gun away in your holster with holes in it? Right? Okay, we're training, I get it. But when you start putting it in the concept of fighting, boom, boom, reload, put it away. I don't care if you sent 3 rounds out. Doesn't matter to me, right? Get that thing ready for war again. So that's a part of this type of course we were originally talking about.
Well, and how do we train, right? I mean, why are we training? For the exact reason of we may need to use this thing in a place starting with a W and ending in a Mart, right? Because we got to do it. So, going back to Tom Givens, Range Master, same thing. Hey, top your mags off, top your mags off. And he was getting that built into people's heads, and not go down a rabbit hole. But the other day, an instructor was like, I run a really safe range. I run a cold range with strict enforcements. And I'm like, well, dude, cold ranges are like one of the most unsafe ranges. And he's like, why? And I was like, you know what? You should probably just take a Range Master course and you'll find out. Yeah, I'm with you. So let me ask you this question, Adam. You call this fighting pistol, correct?
Fighting handgun concepts.
Fighting handgun concepts. Okay. So is there any hand-to-hand style stuff, or is this 100% handgun course?
Oh, no. No, I mean, there's times you've got to fight to a gun, right? I had another instance where I had to hold on to my gun while somebody was trying to grab it. My partner had to come over my head to do the Lord's work for me, right? I mean, sometimes you are fighting your way to the gun or fighting to keep the gun at the same time. So, again, that's something that people should know how to do and be able to either break away, move away, something to where you can use the gun if you need to, or at least retain the gun. Somebody else doesn't keep it. And so therefore, you're going to have to be in contact. You need to be close with people at times. You need to know how to get away. There's a lot to it, right? You're fighting with a gun. And it could be literally my tub of goo smashed up against your tub of goo, right? We're kissing close, and it could be at 3, 5, 10 feet. I don't know how your fight's going to go. So therefore, because oftentimes fight gets in contact, especially a lady, right? What does a guy want to do with a lady? If they don't want her stuff, a guy wants to put a lady down on the ground or down on something and take her clothes off or choke her to death or something like that, right? So it's going to be an extreme close quarters contact. And if she has a gun, Mr. Dirtbag's probably going to realize that and probably go for the gun too. So you need to know how to be able to do that in close quarters. It's not just stand there and shoot guns.
What skills do you want your students to have walking away from this? Is there hey, I want you to be able to sub-second, 1.5 second draw, 4 rounds to an 8-inch circle? Is there a minimum skill set that you're kind of looking for your students to leave your class with?
That would be nice. The problem is when you're suddenly in unconventional positions with a lot of movement and dynamicness, oftentimes your sub-second draw or your 2-second bill drill goes out the window, right? It just goes out the window. It's great. It's a great skill builder and all. Yeah, would I'd like to do that? I'd love everybody to leave with a sub-second draw, first shot. I'd love for everybody to leave with a 2-second bill drill or something to that effect. To me, I just want people to be able to run the gun at the speed with which they can see it. We have a task that we put on a Defenders USA Ace card where they've got to put 5 rounds in it within 5 seconds, but it's done from 10 yards and it's a small card, right? It's very small. And really, I came up with that because, that's one of the things I want them to be able to do, is because that's the speed with which you can litigiously defend what you did in court, right? You take the bill drill. Right. I love the bill drill. It's a great skill builder. It shows people can really manage recoil. You can get the gun out very quickly. You can do a lot of things. But it's also at the speed with which usually people can't think well, certainly not articulate on the stand in court. And whatever you do with a gun, you must be able to stand before your God, a jury, a judge, and be able to explain what you did on every single round. So for me, something like that, a very smaller target, a deeper distance with a high degree of skill and speed, is something that you're forced to be visually engaged with on every shot to know exactly what you're doing. And that's a defensible, litigious position, right? So I'm less concerned with the sub 1 second is maybe a 1.5 second, very clear, understandable shot of what you've done, especially a difficult shot, or maybe 4 or 5 rounds, showing you can manage recoil and have the agreements between your brain and your body that you're not going to trigger the gun until your sights or your dot are back on target, but you can also do it at speed. So therefore your fundamentals are good, but your thought process is good, right? Your visual process is good. Your patience in your shot is good, and your speed or lack of patience in there is not too much, but it's also good. And it forces you to be able to think well. But then we start adding movement to it, because in your shot, in your fight, you're probably going to be moving, right? I learned very quickly, standing still, fat, dumb, and happy is a good way to die, right? To get put in a body bag. But to be able to move, oftentimes offline, towards, away from, something like that, while also engaging a target with a high degree of speed and accuracy, is a hard thing to do, yet it's a necessary life-saving skill. But you have to be able to think through and see through everything. So I want them to be able to do those same type of things while also under movement, because they got articulated. So if we give it a standard, I want you to be able to run a gun at something like those speeds, say 5 rounds, sub 5 seconds, from concealment, from distance, while under movement, because that's articulable in court, because you want to survive the fight, but you also need to survive the fights that are after. And there's multiple fights after. One is just legal, and you have to be able to explain that to possibly a jury of your peers, right, who may not like you, hate you, don't like your politics, geopolitics, religion, or lack thereof, and might hate you because you have a gun. So therefore, you've got to be able to explain in a way that can even be understandable to them, or to a non-gun loving judge, that what you did was reasonable and necessary and thoughtful in everything that you did, so you can survive at least the legal aftermath.
We've talked a lot about skills and the different, task stacking, the cognitive load. Laura, I want to kick it back over to you. Talk to us about some of the, looking back now as an instructor, what are some of the things that you pick up on that other students really struggled with, in that class? Was it the movement stuff? What, as a student, hey, what were they struggling with?
Hopefully I don't glitch out on you again, because you were glitching on me when you asked the question. Usually students do well until they start moving. And once movement gets involved into the program, sometimes, not always, but they have to work harder to keep their brain in the game. And then when you start adding more dynamic movement, like what Adam's doing, which is more than just a lateral, step to the side kind of a thing. It's actually, I don't know how to describe what he does. It's more realistic, I guess you would say. It is literally just learning to run your gun from any position. I mean, getting the gun out safely and running it from any position. But what I would say most people struggle with is movement. What they struggle with the most is usually shooting and moving simultaneously. That's where things really, really go sideways a lot of the time. That's incredibly difficult to do. It requires a lot, not just thoughtfulness, it requires a lot of skill in knowing where your body is, just having body awareness. That's one thing that I learned that I'm even still working on, is like that class will require of you to be incredibly more aware than just standing on a range, of what your body's doing and how it's moving, and how to stay safe in multiple positions. And for some people, that's really hard to do, because some people very much lack awareness of their body and what it's doing. So, and then to put any speed on top of it, like, forget about it,
So if you go to we have a YouTube channel, right? Defenders USA. Anyways, if you go back a couple months, I had a lady come in, and one of our basic drills that we have her do is they start standing and they've got to shoot, say at a B8 from 10 yards on the clock. And then they got to go all the way down to kneeling. Then on sitting on their butt, then laying back on the ground, each time at each position shooting two, then work themselves safely back up to standing and shooting again. And it's both scored for time, hit factor, everything else, right? And that's part of it. And then you add more and more complexity because, I had to shoot and not hit my partner who was this far away from what was going on badly, 10 or so yards from me. And I was on the ground when I had to do it, and rolling into a knee when I had to shoot, and standing up when I had to shoot again, all trying to save his life. And I mean, that was very realistic. So we add that to this, right? It's not just moving offline, back and forth, walking or running. You're going in to the positions you're actually going to be if you're in a fight, right? Where do fights go? They go to the ground. They almost always do. So, or at least oftentimes do. So therefore, using the whole axiom of why suck at anything, let's find all these different positions and learn, as she said, the body awareness and the safety awareness. Then we start adding speed to it while you're being accurate in really weird positions.
Hey, Adam, real quick, I have a question on that. As far as square range, and I'm not asking for any of your kind of secrets, but how do you get around these square ranges where you can't kind of do a total 360 of the ability of moving and shooting and all that stuff?
So yeah, very few ranges give you a 360-degree environment, right? A few do, but not most. So you can change targets where they're at, right? You can make people move from all different directions, but they've always got to turn towards and recognize where it's at to where they go, right? It's actually very rare that I get a 360-degree environment. I think I only get that about once or twice a year at best, where we can shoot in any direction. But you just, in real life, you're probably going to orient towards whatever that is attacking you, scaring you, whatever else. And then you've got to accurately engage it while you're doing things usually. So it's the same thing here. No matter what position people are in a 360-degree environment, you've still got to orient towards, find, seek out, then maneuver to, and keep everybody else safe that might be around.
How has the class evolved from when you started offering it to, say, the last class that you ran?
It evolved in that I started out too hard with people, right? I made it too quick, too hard for the vast majority of people. I've been in a couple different things, and I know how dynamic and hard and scary they are and how quick you need to go, right? And just by God's grace, I'm still here. And so I made it way too hard. I had to walk it back down. It was almost like there was a lack of sympathy for others, for either their lack of athleticism, their lack of endurance, their lack of thoughtfulness. And right, safety is a thing. True thoughtful safety is a thing. So I had to kind of slow it down a little bit and make it more about the concepts than about the do of the thing, right? The more you understand the concepts, the better you tend to be able to execute the stuff. Where before I just made it, here's the thing, go do the thing. Here's why you didn't do the thing, go do the thing better this time. Instead, it became a much more thoughtful exercise, a much more talk through, and one that I make them work through and talk it through. Because, right, the body never goes where the brain's not been. So the more I can get their brain to engage and their brain to understand the conceptual portions to this and how best they would do it based on their medical situation, their athleticism or lack thereof, the more we can get them to do that and think that through, the more it's kind of their idea instead of just me forcing them to do it, and the more they get that. So it's been I wouldn't say a slowdown, but it's become a bit more thoughtful of the students and a bit more thoughtful of what we're doing so that they get the depth of it all and they get the concepts better. And maybe we have slowed down a bit to an extent, but it's not slower, it's just more thoughtful. And by being more thoughtful, I've seen the skill increase, I've seen the safety increase, and I've seen also the speed and the accuracy increase because they got the concepts instead of just somebody just constantly trying to shove this into them in their brains and just push them harder and harder and harder, right? It was like the proverbial knife hand constantly trying to get the skills and the words into their brains. And it became more, okay, let's make this you learning these concepts and you understanding them, and now let's execute them. So it became a bit more genteel and it became a bit more thoughtful. And I've come to realize over the years that a thoughtful warrior is better than just somebody who's a hard charger all the time.
As an instructor, one of the questions that we ask.
Sorry, dogs.
No, you're fine. We'll take it out in post. Not a big deal.
Okay, my wife's coming. Skipper. My wife's coming home. She's had a long day at work.
What kind of dog?
Yes, he's a mutt. I don't know.
Yeah, I do. I got a basset hound, and then I have a pit bull. And some days they're both terrible, and then other days one of them is less terrible. So.
Well, anytime she or we come home, they seem to think they need to scream about it. So
yeah,
and that poor girl, she's had some long, hard days recently. So
a couple weeks ago, my daughter's coming up the stairs, and I have a baby gate at the top of the stairs because we have a 9-month-old, and you hear her just kind of very faintly say, "Somebody help me," and I'm like, "Oh, that's great." And I think I was in the middle of talking because she wanted somebody to help her over the baby gate. I'm like, "Oh, that's great. It's going to sound like I'm kidnapping kids on the podcast." So awesome. All right. I'll take all of that stuff out in post. I was going to ask, we talk to a lot of our students and we get their perspective on, hey, what's the most challenging part of the class for you as a student? I kind of want to kick that back over to you as an instructor. What's the hardest thing for you to do as an instructor? And that's probably a broad ass question, but.
Well, the admin side, right? I'm just a knuckle dragging cop, right? The admin side is always the hardest, right? The salesmanship side of this thing, trying to get people to realize they need this. They need this desperately. I'm not a salesman. I can sell you a bullet or handcuff all day long, but the rest of it is you need to come to this course is just not my gig, right? I'd say that's the hard part. On the range itself, it's really just when it comes to this type of class, right? This is kind of one of the higher end classes, I guess you'd say, that I teach, is that just truly trying to ensure that everybody is truly thoughtful about this, right? Of slowing them down. They have so much going on in their heads. I mean, I get some pretty high end operators in there and literally Grandma Good Cookies who just happens to be smart and skilled, right? So I have a lot of smart people that come into this thing. And sometimes they get so much going on, they forget some of the basic stuff. And so trying to keep them thoughtful. And it's not the hardest part. I'd say it's the scariest part, right? Of trying to trust them, getting them to realize they can trust themselves if they can. Or if they can't trust themselves, then slowing themselves down into where they know they can do this, right? We're just in training. We're not in our fight. So in training, take the time to be thoughtful about it. So I would say that's part of it. The other is just herding cats, right? You always got people that show up and, they think they're a ninja with a gun and they shouldn't even have one for the most part, right? But they've been shooting all their lives, right? And then the other ones who they're the lures, right? That they come in, they're a really good shooter. They just haven't realized it yet. And having the confidence to go and just really just let go. The hard part is getting them to realize their levels, where they're at, and either bringing it down as needed or pushing there. And I wouldn't say it's hard, but it's always a different challenge to different people because people think in different ways. So you're constantly having to be a chameleon to be able to talk to, say, Andy one way or try to get a message through to Andy in another way. But say if it's me, maybe it's got to be a different way. But if it's for you, Jeremy, or for Laura, it's got to be done a different way. And to get them all to individually wake up to their potential or to drag down to what their real potential is, that is I think that's part of the skill of being an instructor, and always trying to read that and then second guessing yourself and then trying to find a new way to do it. I think that's part of the exhaustion is trying to make sure you're meeting everybody at their level, if that makes sense.
I can tell you as a student who's also an instructor, there are very few things that frustrate me more in a $400 or $600 class than when I'm on the range and these dudes can't follow simple instructions. I'm like,
oh yeah,
he told us keep your mags topped off, man. What are you doing? Why are we like, you paid $600 for this 2-day class. What, you can't manage your ammo? What the hell? When you mentioned herding cats, that brought me back on the range. I'm like, oh man, really? I was like, I'll shoot for him. I have 5 mags ready to go right now. Laura,
so I've got one to add here, right? You said one of the hardest things. If people show up at my range and they don't have a sense of humor, they need to freaking leave. Just go away, right? And when you got those people that show up and they're too serious about life, they have no sense of humor, right? They have no imagination. That is tough, man, because life's tough, man. You might as well have some fun with it. So I try to have a blast on my range, because I find if people are a little bit shocked or they're laughing, they tend to pay a lot more attention. So I try to make it almost a comedy show that's extremely serious, right, all the time. And it seems to impart well. But when I get that person that's just, oh my goodness, you just want to shoot blood out of your eyes, you know?
It breaks the tension. If I'm doing my range safety brief, I have a couple jokes in there, and if they all fail, I'm like, all right, this is these guys are all going to be tensed. We're going to have to work on some other stuff. I've been saying these jokes for 4 years. I usually get 2 chuckles each class. So if I get none, I know we're in trouble. But it does. I mean, and I've taken classes. You get up there in like a Tom Gibbons course or a Masada Yu. I'm like, hold on, man. This is not your public persona at all.
Yep.
Funny thing is, one of those chuckles is from me, and it's just for pity.
Yeah, that's true. So the other one is the Middle East. Laura, where do you think this class should fall on a student's continuum of training?
Ooh, well, they're going to be better off if they can handle a gun pretty well before they get there. I mean, safety absolutely is a must. That has to be in place for everyone's safety. Adam is good. I mean, you just talked about how hard it is to meet somebody at their level, but he's good at meeting people at their level. But I would say if you want to have the best experience with this class, I wouldn't make it the first couple I've ever taken. Would you agree? No yeah, no I would get some experience under your belt and get some. I mean, I think that this class is best suited in your 3-day, like what you're doing in Montana next week, where you've got fundamentals the first day, speed, accuracy, and movement the second day, and then fighting handgun concepts the third day. Then he can just build you from the ground up and get you prepared and ready for it. And that would probably be ideal if that's something that you were interested in doing, because it could be hit or miss if you it's hard to know, right? I mean, I thought I was pretty well trained when I went into his class. And even on the first day of fundamentals, I realized, no, I really kind of wasn't. So for me to say, well, take this many classes and then you're good, or do X, Y, Z, it depends on the person, and you got to be honest about where you are. And I thought I was, but I didn't have a clue. So
yeah, I mean, Jeremy, you've been to a lot of range master courses from what I can see, right? Even when I showed up at Tom's master level course, right, there was people in there that shouldn't even had a gun, right? Yet they had passed the first 2 classes, and here they are in this, and even Tom's kicking 1 or 2 people out, and he rightfully did so. And it's just so everybody thinks they're a ninja with a gun, right? They've been shooting, they think they're good. They went to a competition or 2 or whatever it is. They were a cop, they were something, and they think they're ninjas. And my goodness, the amount of time you spend fixing people. So it's hard to give a standard like Laura is saying, but you should know what you're doing. You need a pretty quick draw stroke from concealment, preferably, right? You need to be able to manage recoil. You need to think. Safety is absolute paramount. And you have to be decently smart. So if you're the mouth breather and you shoot a gun occasionally because daddy taught you to shoot now and then, you probably shouldn't show up at this course.
No, that makes sense. I completely forgot when I took that instructor level course. I was like, some of the questions they're asking in the class, I'm like, how are you an instructor? And this is the question that you're asking.
Exactly.
What the hell are you? This is simple stuff.
And Tom's funny about it. I like that guy.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, Tom's funny. Mas was, I don't know if you've ever taken one of his classes. We took it, 5 years ago, Andy? Kind of as a, hey, let's train with this guy before he's done training.
Yeah.
And he's a vulgar dude, man. He's got he's got some jokes. What do you think your students say about this class when they're talking with their buddies?
Intense. This sounds bad. Life-changing. I've heard people tell me that they've been to training most of their lives and they've rarely seen this, if ever seen it. That they got trusted. They got trusted with a gun, right? The way they'd have to be in the real world. They got worn out, right? They get beat up, not beat up physically, but I mean they it's what they put into it, right? I've had I just did this recently, and I had a 79-year-old man in there. I've had one with like a 72-year-old lady. You put into it what you can, and yet it stretches and pushes you. I don't know. Let's ask Laura. She's probably better for this.
Well, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Jeremy, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that's exactly what I was going to do. I was going to kick that same question over to you, Laura.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would say he's right. You are going to be pushed and stretched in ways that you don't realize. You think with Adam, you're going to a gun class. Okay, you're going to a gun class. You'll be a better shooter. But what you don't realize is what you'll learn about yourself in the process. And you'll learn your strengths and weaknesses pretty darn quick. He'll bring them out of you pretty darn quick through the training. And he's right. You'll get out of it what you put into it. If you dig in and trust him and try hard and put in the work, then you'll get out of it what you put in. You will be exhausted mentally, probably emotionally, depending on what kind of speeches he gives, and definitely physically. It'll put you in the ringer, but it'll be just like one of those days where I don't know if any of you have grown up in a rural environment or not, but when you like have a whole wagon of hay, you got to buck into the barn or whatever the thing is, the task that has to be done, that nobody else is going to do it. You're the guy that's got to do it, or the girl. And when you go to bed at night and you lay your head down on the pillow, it's like the best feeling in the world, because you just gave it everything you had and you just left it all out there. And that's what Adam encourages of everyone, no matter where you're at on your skill level or physicality or anything like that. And not very many classes bring that out of you. So I appreciate that. But you do need recuperation time afterwards.
Yeah, I find a lot of people generally, they're smart if they take the next day off, like a Monday, and just go drool on the couch, right? Because you're going to be sore. You're going to be wore out. And Laura hits something, right? Yeah, technically it's a gun class, it's a shooting class, and it is. But I know for everything that Laura and I do, and the others with Defenders, I mean, it's really about surviving the hardest day of your life. Just as importantly, it's surviving the massive aftermath that comes. So that's largely, as much as I possibly can, incorporate it into a shooting class. And most people think they're just coming to a fun gun class, right? Or a cool gun class or a ninja gun class. And really it's about learning you and waking up you and preparing this for the day that you may truly need it and survive it, so you can better survive for those who deserve you and love you. And now you're not drowning your sorrows in a bottle or a needle and too much credit, or losing a marriage, because that happens so often in these type of things. And it's really just the growth of the person. We're just using the gun to get there. And okay, we put some skills in there too, but I find oftentimes, and I hear this over and over and over, is it's more emotionally draining than it is physically and mentally, because it's so deeply tapped into. And unfortunately, I have both the blessing and the curse of being able to, on a firsthand level, multiple times, be able to talk about the survival of the aftermath. And that's become the passion of mine, right? You may not be able to see it, but up there on my safe is a headstone for my best friend, my partner, right, who could not survive the mental aftermath. And I have too many partners in the military, my buddies in the military. I have too many civilians that we had to put in a body bag because they couldn't survive the aftermath. So though I want to build the skills, I'd rather build the person. And if we can build the skills, but also build the person, both the internal fortitude, the mental fortitude, the spiritual fortitude, and really also the legal understandings and all that you've got to survive in litigious America. Now we're building the whole person. And to me, that's the bigger passion. It's just we're using the gun to get there, because the gun's the sexy part. That's the part that attracts everybody. And they don't usually realize they're coming to something a lot more. And when I get that, especially when I have my students who've called me, or somebody that I've trained, and they tell me about their survival of something horrific, and that's that's the real gift, I think, both to them and to me, is being able to be a part of their growth so they survive for the life they actually truly deserve.
That was a really good wrap up, Adam. And I think you just kind of pretty much ended in a really good way as to why you do and what you're doing. So for all of us out there, we appreciate what you've done. We thank you for your service. You know, that often is said often, but take it to heart, you know, because everything you're doing, everything your previous past experience and everything you're still giving back to your community, I think is really huge. So thank you for that. I did want to ask one final question because I was kind of looking at your website right now just to see what kind of classes you have upcoming, of course. And I see in October you have a handgun speed accuracy and movement course. Looks like it's a 1-day course. How does that course kind of work in with the course we're talking about today? Would you call
So
that?
I would tell you, I would tell you that's generally a precursor, right? Think of all the big name trainers out there, right? It's all speed and accuracy, right? This, I'm just adding a little bit of movement to it because, well, that's what fights are. They include speed, accuracy, and movement. So it's the precursor to this, right? We start with the handgun fundamentals. That's not fundamentals, but it really is. It's a lot deeper than the vast majority of fundamentals I've ever been to. Then we go, once that's solid and good, then we go into speed, accuracy, and movement. Once that's good, now we're moving into the fighting handgun course. If I had my druthers, like when I've done this for, say, an SRT team or ERT or a SWAT team or something, or a Spec Ops group, I'll take this and I'll make the whole thing a 5-day or 6-day course to where we start literally the fundamentals. And yeah, I've had Rangers and Green Berets and Navy SEALs show up, right? And they're solid until they end up in the fundamentals. And then we build them all the way to this, or at least take what they've got and refine it a little bit. That's the best way to go. But the speed, accuracy, and movement, unfortunately, it's only 1 day. When I can do it, I'll do it for 2, but that's the 1-day course, but that's really the precursor to this. So if you're going to Tim Herron, you know, Scott Jedlinski, Brian Hill, Tom Givens, whomever, right? That is phenomenal. That's all the stuff I'm looking for before I even get you into the handgun fighting, the fighting handgun concepts.
Makes sense. I think Andy was alluding to giving you all the evening back. Before we jump off of here, I just want to kick it around kick it over to Laura and then back to you, Adam. What advice do you have for somebody who's signing up for this class?
Come with an open mind and a lot of ammo. Be prepared as much as you can physically to be tested. I'm not sure you can prepare yourself for the mental and emotional part of it, but just again, if you're open-minded, you'll do well. And you know, leave your ego at home. Be humble about what you're doing. That's very helpful. And you know, kind of don't be afraid to show up wherever you are. Like, you know, it's not a gun competition. It's a learning environment. So, you know, if you aren't a ninja with a gun, but you're curious, you know, that's okay. I mean, you don't have to be. You have to be safe. That definitely is a thing. But just show up where you are, and Adam can build you from wherever you are. And you know, I know a lot of people get really bent out of shape about going to a class. They get really nervous about it. They build it up and, oh my gosh, how am I going to do? And all this stuff. And that's not it. I mean, like he says, he grows people. So you have to meet people where they are. And then, you know, you'll learn to trust him in doing that. And honestly, you'll learn to trust yourself more too. You'll come out of it a lot more competent, but a lot more confident. And, you know, it's hard. People have asked me this before, and it's so hard to put into words what you get out of it. It's just like you have to experience it. I don't really have a whole lot more adjectives I could say about it. It's just you have to experience it to really understand. And then once you've done it, then you just kind of want to shout it from the rooftops and like tell everybody about it. It's one of those kind of classes. So
awesome. Adam, back over to you. What advice do you have somebody who's taking this class? Laura said you had a 3-day class coming up in a couple weeks. What advice do you have for those folks?
So I have a class coming up this weekend in Montana, where Laura's at, actually. Just come open. Just come open, right? You might already be a ninja. You might be some SWAT cop. You might be some USPSA master, grandmaster. Come open. Realize it's you preparing you for the worst day of your life. And if you're willing to do that and maybe take a few words of advice or a few words from somebody who's been through a little bit, it might be of a help. Be ready to work. Be ready to, more importantly, be ready to think. Be ready to feel. And I'm not talking just tactilely. I'm talking just also inside. You need to, sometimes people need to have the why deeply crystallized, and that needs to be a feel-based. Come with a true sense of purpose, right? And as Laura said so well, you don't have to be a gun ninja to be there. You just have to be safe. If you can be thoughtful and safe, I can train anybody. I don't care who you are, right? Or we all could, right? Just be thoughtful and safe. And then be willing to trust this process you're going through that should be a journey of discovery of what you can do that's so unfortunately rarely taught. Yet I think, in my limited experience, is also very realistic. So if you're willing to go through that process and trust this process, trust yourself, I'll try to gain your trust, and I don't tend to lose people's trust. But if you'll trust me and if you'll trust yourself and just work through this and be thoughtful through this, you'll be ready for it when that day comes. I know that for a fact for myself and for a few of the people who've been through this course. And it's really just about preparing for your worst day of your life, or maybe somebody's you love. So if we can build that mind and body to do it, or that brain and that heart to do it, the body will be able to do it in the moment with more efficiency. And once you've been in that, you realize gunfights really are all about efficiency. The more efficient you are, the sooner it's over. And the sooner it's over, the more likely you are to live. And not only that, more likely to live, but more likely to live with less medical complication, less legal complication, because it's over thoughtfully and efficiently. So therefore, come learn this stuff as efficiently as possible. Be truly thoughtful throughout. And once you know the concepts and some of the movements, the body tends to adapt, even to the dynamicness of a real fight. And if you'll do those type of things, just come open, just come safe, you'll be just fine.
That's very well said. I'm going to steal Andy's wrap up, and I want to thank you guys very much for coming on to the episode tonight. I know it's it's a big ask to spend a couple of hours with us this evening, sharing your experience and your expertise. So thank you so much for that. That'll be the last time I steal Andy's, because he does a much more elegant job with the wrap up. Thank you.
I don't
Andy,
know if that's true.
It is. I hear you do it, and I'm like, oh man, that sounds so elegant. It must be easy. And then I'm like, oh, here I am fumbling words. So, Andy, any parting thoughts?
Well, you stole my thank yous, but I'm going to say thanks anyway to both of you guys. I noticed you have an HK shirt on there, Adam. My carry gun's an HK VP9, so I'm just saying I'm with you guys. I'm in the club. But I was looking at the website. I know, right? There we go. Finally. I was looking at the website, and tell us what your website is there real quick, Adam.
So it's Defenders-USA. You got to have the dash. Defenders-USA.com. We have a YouTube channel, Defenders USA. You'll see that shield on there. Or you have Defenders-Live. It's another one of our websites. It's actually Laura's. And boy, spend some time learning from Laura. And then she has a YouTube channel called Defenders Live. Just phenomenal. Just absolutely, I think, completely complimentary to everything you guys are doing. I think we'd love to get you on too. But it's Laura's show. She may not like you. I don't know. But you can find us on Locals and Rumble and all the different platforms, Instagram and all, but that's where you find us.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you guys so much. We'll give you the rest of the evening back. Remember, it's your life. It's your safety and protection. It's your responsibility. Thanks for jumping on.